and those brands, but there's a heap of toolkits available as well. So Scottish Food Drink Fortnight website is probably the first place to go to.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Now I know that this word I'm about to utter is actually a word that you like because it creates debate, and that word is veganism. We've talked about it in previous episodes briefly. We're all about, on the onFARM podcast, we're all about sustainable food production, and that can very much include red meat. But there's also, as well as kind of normal food production, as it were, there's the organic sector as well. And I've noticed in other statistics that I saw this week that the whole movement during COVID and lockdown of people realising, hang on, I'm not using my car as much, so I'm not travelling by plane. People who want not necessarily specifically an organic lifestyle, but a lifestyle that is more sustainable and more wholesome, which is, I suppose, partly connected to local, but not exclusively connected to local. What have you noticed in that kind of organic, with a small O, I suppose it would be, that kind of movement in recent months?
So I think over a period of years, the local term almost took the place of what had been organic before. And I think this in part it's about transition. So, if you go back 20 years, the big issues would have been about food safety, actually. We lived in a period of, salmonella scares and E. coli issues and, BSE going back 25 years. That was all dealt with, addressed, and then food safety gets taken for granted. Then it's about animal welfare, and there's huge advances of Scotland being a country that's pioneered farm insurance. Suddenly animal welfare, well, actually you don't need to look out for products specifically high welfare, because you've got to presume if it's from Scotland, that's a new baseline that's there. So I think the bar has just been lifted, and what has happened, and I think is a testament to the work of producers, organic and conventional, the quality of what they've done and the reputation that Scotland has built has mean that word Scottish or Scotch or the saltire has become a bit of a byword for high quality. Organics is pretty steady, about 2% of all sales in retail in the UK is organics. Lifted a little bit, I think, over the last couple of years. Veganism's even less than that. But there are products and opportunities for shoppers to connect around organics, veganism, or not, as the case may be. So I think the work going into really Scotland's brand is about saying, we're not interested in large volumes, low cost and low standards. Other countries, if they want to go down that road, you crack on, guys. We are interested in really high quality. Some of it will be organic, some of it won't. Some of it will be plant-based, some of it won't. But if you're interested in high quality, good news, you're in the right place, or you're doing business with the right country. Work with Scotland. And I think that's what's been the change over the last wee while. And I think that's fed through into a greater national pride in and around food and drink, which I don't think existed, again, going back to the early days when we were kicking around the circuit, Anna.
Yeah, I think you're right. I remember my first day at NFU Scotland actually was a parliamentary event down at Westminster talking about milk prices. And I know dairy farmers are still fighting about milk prices, but one of the good things that's happened in the intervening years is that consumers have got more of an interest, I think, and more of a demand to have Scottish or British milk in their cheese and in their yoghurt and in the milk carton itself. And I think that has definitely played a key part. But now I'm getting a bit hungry talking about food, and I know that we had delivered to you a small package of Scottish goodies. Now, by no means does this represent every possible Scottish food and drink sector, but can you talk us through the kind of not necessarily the specific brands you've got there, but some of the products you've got? I know you've got some jam that contains Scottish berries and some Scotch beef and various things. Can you maybe just talk us through it from a Scotland food and drink perspective, and maybe in relation to the fortnight, and why some of these sectors are so important to the Scottish food and drink sector?
Yeah, sure. So when you dropped me that email saying, do I fancy coming on the podcast, I was going to say yes anyway, but the deal was certainly sweetened when you said you were going to drop around a bag of some goodies. So producer Dave dropped some off at the door not so long ago. It's actually quite a nice mix of, I suppose, what makes Scotland great. So I'm sat at my table here, as I have been in lockdown for the last 5-6 months with various electronic devices, but the site is made much better by having a portfolio of products in front of me. So there's a bit of bakery going on. So we've got traditional Scottish oat cakes, actually from a business up in the Highlands that is a good example, I think, of businesses in Scotland. They're selling a bit locally, and it's landed on my table here just now. They're also selling into the US and elsewhere. Yeah. I've got a cider here as well from, I think this business is, I'm pretty sure it's Dundee, Tayside area, and you know, the whole craft drink sector has just been unbelievable. I mean, it's totally exploded the last few years. And it was a story of kind of craft beer and obviously whiskey and gin, but now it's cider and it's rum, and there's even a Scottish business producing tequila now, which might be dangerous on a Saturday night.
Oh, I didn't know that,
yes,
actually.
Yeah.
Although, tequila hasn't always agreed with me.
No,
so
no. Apparently you're supposed to sip it and not...
okay, that's where I've been going wrong.
Yeah, drink it sensibly, Anna, that's what's been going wrong. And then some homemade jam here as well, Taybury jam, just from the farm shop up the road. And clearly, knowing well my weakness on the food front is a slab of cheese here from Kintyre. And I think for me, and I'm a total bias on cheese, right? So I'm a cheese fanatic. Cheese is to food what whiskey is to drinks. There's so many different varieties and types and taste and story in behind them. And I used to be a cheese fanatic at Christmas, kind of traditionally, and I've found that it's a year-round pursuit now. So, as well as some smoked salmon here, and we've got some sliced beef as well. So, you are going to keep me going for some time with all of this.
We apologise if any specific sector of food and drink was missed out of that basket. We didn't send you very much alcohol because it's only lunchtime. But I think what it does is provide a bit of a flavour, of everything that's available in Scotland and the quality. You've mentioned it already. You know, Scotland is a country that doesn't just produce food and drink; it produces quality food and drink, and I think that is absolutely critical. Now, the one thing that we couldn't find actually at the well-known farm shop near Edinburgh that we went to for this basket of goodies, we couldn't find a crystal ball to send you. So I'm hoping you've got one already. Because I'd love to hear from you partly about Scotland Food and Drink as an organisation, but broader than that as well, the food and drink sector in Scotland, Scottish Food and Drink Fortnight, you know, everybody involved in the food and drink sector. Where are we going? And if we imagine that you and I are having, hopefully we'll speak again before this, but if we imagine that you and I are having another conversation in 5 years' time, what will we be talking about, do you think? Hopefully it won't be pandemics. So let's park that one for a minute. But what else do you think we'll be talking about in 5 years? Oh,
that's a particularly cruel question, given, as you said, there is no crystal ball available. So it's interesting. So coming into 2020, if you'd asked me this, so before we go ahead 5 years, let's go back 8 months. And if you said start of 2020, how are things looking? And I said, well, we've got, we're in a nation of phenomenally diverse products, really talented producers, and we've got a growing brand. Brexit's coming around the corner. I'm a wee bit scared about that. I'm losing a bit of sleep about that. But do you know what? We've got through worse. We'll just have to roll with the punches and manage that situation. COVID's come along and ripped the rug under a lot of what was happening. We reckon, probably £3 billion wiped off the value of the sector. So that's, at least 20% of that. But actually, stepping out of that crisis stuff, what makes Scotland's food and drink story exciting? Well, it's the same things I just mentioned: producers, products, reputation, quality. Where's the world heading in food and drink? I think increasingly people want to know the story behind their products. They want the assurance that, not only are they high quality and high welfare, but increasingly that they make a positive contribution to the planet, not a negative one. And that's a real change that's coming. You talked about veganism earlier on, Anna, and plant-based stuff. Actually, a lot about that is about climate change. So actually, how do we produce climate-friendly food? How do we become the world's most sustainable, climate-friendly producer of beef? And I think that's doable. So let's go ahead 5 years. I think we have taken this local food culture on leaps and bounds. I think the default of most of our main hotels and bars and restaurants will be to start with a Scottish menu, and those that don't do it will find they're going to have empty chairs and empty tables. I think that we're going to see, even in big retailers, which will go through a dramatic change. I think the supermarket sector will go through a dramatic change as it tries to adjust to online and the competitiveness between them. But I think Scottish will be a critical part of that. And I think the reputation that whisky has globally as being Scotland's great export will be shared by a whole suite of other products as well. So that, in the midst of coming through, the first wave of a pandemic, might seem dramatically naive or overly optimistic, but I have to say I'm pretty unbowed when it comes to the opportunities that Scotland's facing. And I still think if you want to find a country anywhere in the world to take forward a farming sector, fishing sector, food and drink sector, you'd want to land in Scotland. You'd want to start from here. And I think that's the huge opportunity we have. There's going to be hurdles and bumps coming along the way. I didn't see COVID coming. I did not see it coming. I've seen a TED talk with Bill Gates predicting it a few years ago. The man is smarter than I am and most other people, because I didn't see it coming. And I guarantee in 10 years' time or 5 years' time, when we look back, there'll be a whole heap of other things that came at us that we didn't see coming. But if we try and stay the course and recognise our strengths and what customers here and around the world want, I think we're going to be in a good place.
Yes, you're right. I think, as we've seen, COVID is positive is not a word we want to associate with COVID, but there have been many silver linings, and that the support for Scottish and local has definitely been one of them. I suppose a slightly fairer... Go on.
I think one of the interesting angles, though, is what this means. What does the future mean for farming? You'll be sat in a house on a farm just now, I suppose, looking out the window at the rain, if it's any like where it is at the moment, which is never good during harvest. But
pouring.
Just the vagaries of the unpredictable for you and the family in rain and weather and events that are out of your control. And I think a large part of farming's future is about how do we regain more of that control. I think we're in a country that produces high quality. I think if we have a farming industry that thinks it produces a commodity, I think we're done. I think we'd be better just shutting up the shop. I think we've got to think hard about premium markets and what we're doing. And I sense that there's a generation of farmers coming through that want to move beyond that kind of support structure and the state telling them what to do and actually grab that market thing. And whilst I would be unashamed in saying the food and drink story in Scotland has been a success, it has been a good thing, I'm not sure that success has filtered down enough and resulted in real changes or positivity necessarily at the farm gate, and that we got to change. And I'm convinced that's about farmers and process and all that working much more closely together. So I think that's doable, but before we think it's all rosy and it's just opportunity to be grabbed, I think real change in agriculture is coming, and I think it'll be a good thing.
Yeah, well, I think if anybody wasn't a fan of yours before you just said that last bit within the farming sector, I think they will be now, James, because I think there are many people listening, farmers and people working in the farming sector listening, who love what they do but sometimes feel a bit underappreciated. And I think to hear you say that, I think is very welcome. And there are changes to come. They might be technology related. We just bought a robotic lawnmower because my farming husband never has time to mow the lawn. But, by the time our children are our age, he's going to have a robotic tractor, maybe even before then, which means that he can spend less time sitting on a tractor seat and more time running a business and developing that business and looking to the future. And if many people are like that, then so much the better.
Yeah, totally agree.
But looking just briefly into the future, and I certainly don't want to devalue Scottish Food and Drink Fortnight, because it's fantastic and we're in the midst of it right now and we want everyone to engage. But there are kind of other key times coming up. In a couple of months, it's St Andrew's Day. There's usually something going on to celebrate Scottish food and drink then. And then, of course, we've got Christmas after that. So what have you got in the pipeline in terms of other activities? So
at the moment, we've been working really hard on thinking what a recovery plan looks like for the sector, and working hard with government in and around that. So before COVID kicked off, we developed a whole programme which we called regional showcasing. So it was in different parts of Scotland, trying to bring the hospitality industry together with producers in their area. So food tourism is growing all over the world. and we're seeing agri-tourism flourish in parts of Scotland as well. The future of the tourism sector, and that industry has been hit harder than any over the last few months, but the future of the tourism industry is going to be intrinsically linked to the future of the food and drink industry. And the more we can do that kind of bringing together of producers and the people who are selling food and drink to punters up and down the country, the better it will be. And we'll do more of that. And that might mean we're doing virtual, meet the buyer events rather than the physical events we did before. We're going to have to put a bit of effort into, and I really don't want to use the word Brexit because I've used